Hi everyone, welcome back to the Man Cave of an Acting Teacher for another video. It's a beautiful day here in Lockdown Ireland. Thank you very much for all your responses and questions and curiosity about these videos. It's keeping me interested and giving me a mission. We're going to talk about that in a minute as well, right? It's giving me something to focus my attention, to concentrate my attention, all right? So look, I hope you're well. Today we're going to talk about ideas. I've talked previously about making your own work. In a previous video, I talked about how it is ideal for you to be creating your own work, putting on your own plays, making movies if you can, and constantly doing that to keep yourself interested and involved, and also bettering yourself all the time as you go along as well, all right? But this one in particular, I'm going to talk about where ideas come from. So I know the feeling that sometimes, and again from an email conversation I had, you know, that feeling where you kind of go to a short film festival or something and you look at all these wonderful short films one after the other and you think, where do these people come up with this stuff? Where do these ideas come from? Yeah, and they come from various different places and various different sources, right? But I'm going to try and make that specific so that you can kind of work out perhaps a way that you can come up with an idea and then shape it into an interesting film, right? So let's imagine that we're not going for a Disney film, we're not going for a major blockbuster where we need a lot of stunts and things like that, and special effects, because we don't have that technology, right? But we do have the technology of the camera on our phone, and we have the technology of reasonably affordable editing equipment and things like that, and we have the technology of a stage if we want to put on a play. I will kind of focus this more into film, okay, in screen, but of course this applies to theatre as well, all right? So you're looking at all of these films and you're saying to yourself, okay, well, where do people come up with this idea? You can come at it from kind of two different ends, if you like. In fact, there's several ends, if you like, but let's look at these two. One is that you've got a really interesting character that has a really interesting problem, and what that does then is it tends to reveal the other end, which is a theme, all right, or an idea that is common to a lot of people, all right, and is interesting to a lot of people, right? So there's a movie, I'm going to use a bunch of examples here, right? So there's a short film that won the Short Film Academy Award a few years ago that was made here in Ireland called Stutterer. Stutterer is about a man with a really bad stutter. Young man with a really bad stutter. So he decides to give up, right? And instead of trying to speak, he decides to pretend to the world that he's deaf and learn sign language instead. Easier, yeah? He's full of a lot of anger and a lot of angst at the way that he can't communicate, and that's what he tends to do. That's what he decides, rather, to do. I won't give away the ending. You should see it. It's really, very good. So that's a really interesting, curious thing that I had never thought of before. What would it be like? Yeah. And so what the writer or the person who comes up with this idea is doing, I suppose, and I don't know the guys who made the film, but you know, they're thinking, okay, this is unusual, all right? Maybe this hasn't been done before. A stutterer, someone with a bad stutter who decides to give in and learn sign language instead as an alternative to communication. You play with that idea, you play with that character. What does that mean? Okay, what are we actually talking about thematically? Talking thematically about communication and the need to communicate, the need to be able to speak, the need to be able to exchange with people, okay, in order to find relationships, love, connection with people, and the risk that one takes to put oneself out there, to connect with somebody at the risk of being hurt, laughed at, yeah? And that happens, I think, to everybody, right, to some extent, right? So it becomes, even though it's a very curious, kind of unusual idea in terms of an individual, the stutterer, it has a much more universal appeal because lots of people in the world, probably everybody at some point, has realized that it's a risk to break down their walls, connect with somebody at the risk of being hit, slapped, you know, embarrassed, humiliated, and pushed away, okay? So that gets interrogated in this film of Stutterer. And so in a way, it's very individual, but then it becomes universal. So I hope this is kind of helping a little bit. I know that's a big thing to kind of say, and then to say, no, you go and find something like that. Where do you find something like that? It's a matter of actually thinking about those things in your life, I think, right, that confuse you, that possibly inspire your curiosity, okay? Things that you don't quite get. Why does that person behave like that? Imagine what it would be like to be that, to have a bad stutter, or to be autistic, or to be something, right? And what might it be like to be within that life, and then go on a little imaginative daydream, all right, as Meisner would put it. Daydream about that. Let's imagine that, you know, I am that person, perhaps, going from the acting perspective. I'm someone with a very bad stutter, and I'm sick of being laughed at. You know, I'm sick and tired of being looked at like I have two heads when I try to communicate. So what am I going to do about it, right? And in doing that, then, you create this film that then reveals a bigger, more universal theme, which is about communication. Okay, let's take a different example, right? Let's take, or you could take anything really that's a classic, right? A classic film that stands the test of time. Let's take Taxi Driver. It's a good example, okay? So Taxi Driver, Martin Scorsese's film about a Vietnam vet who comes back and drives taxis around New York. What is it interrogating? Thematically, it's interrogating the theme of loneliness, okay, and isolation, but through the lens of a really interesting main character who is a Vietnam vet who's come home and is alone, socially awkward, socially inept, finds it very hard to communicate, tries then to open himself up to people, tries to form a relationship by dating a pretty girl that he sees in a political candidate's office, right, working in there, and she rejects him, right? He tries his best to, you know, but again, socially awkward, makes some very silly mistakes, right? And she blanks him, ghosts him, whatever the way you say it now is, right? And he realizes that, you know, he's not like other people, and he's not going to be able to connect with other people on that level. So what does he do? He finds for himself a mission. And the mission replaces the need for that human interaction. And his mission, first of all, becomes quite a vicious one, which is to assassinate a political candidate. And then once he realizes that that's not really, in fact, what he wants to do, he turns it onto this child prostitute that he meets, and he decides that his mission is going to be to rescue her, to save her, okay? To make some moral statement where, you know, in this cesspit of a city where people behave horribly, meanly, and selfishly all the time. He's going to do this much more philanthropic kind of thing, this kind of action that's going to create a kind of a moral statement for himself instead. So it's a really interesting idea, but what does it do? It interrogates, same thing, a wider theme that probably a lot of people have to deal with at some point in their life, loneliness, through the lens of a really interesting character. Okay, so I think I'm hopefully making clear what you might be able to do. If you could come up with something, with an idea, all right, that perhaps hasn't been explored before, right, or not explored in this particular way or in a particular way, and daydream on that and come up with a character, okay, that is interesting, that we can watch within that, right, who, as an audience, we want to follow, okay, to see what happens to them, and then you create your arc, you create your 3-act structure, or whatever it is. If you're making a feature or a short, you'll find your structure, work out your structure, which I've already talked about in another video, right? And then you start to write that idea in, yeah? So great art in terms of storytelling is often about what seems to be a simple enough story of a Vietnam vet who decides to drive taxis, tries to get a girlfriend, that doesn't work, finds a mission for himself, and I won't give away the ending, all right? seems like a simple enough story, but reveals a much more universal interrogation or investigation of the idea of loneliness and what that can do to us psychologically and psychiatrically, I suppose, in a lot of ways. Or something like, again, Stutterer, right? Where we have a very interesting character, I won't go over it again, right? And that reveals a wider theme as well. So you have a thing for yourself, all right? What theme, if you want to go from this end, what theme might you like to explore? What idea is interesting to you? What is something that you struggle with in your life, all right? Do you struggle with a mental illness of some sort, okay? Do you struggle with loneliness, right? Have you been hurt, rejected after making yourself vulnerable and being open and generous, right? And whatever that thing is, you know, have you experienced something like grief? You know, what is the thing that is at the moment in your life, or maybe not even at the moment, but one of the big things in your life that really makes you confused, perhaps, because you can't resolve it? Yeah, something that bothers you, something that you feel you need to look deeper into, and then ask yourself, on the narrative end of it, what kind of character can I create that's interesting to look at and interesting to watch and interesting to follow, so that that theme, that idea, that concept that I'm interrogating can be interrogated and revealed on a deeper level. Yeah? So I know that that's not an easy answer to that, but when you do come up with a project of that nature, you probably will come up with something that's reasonably easy for you to create on the equipment that you actually have, because it's very human. Yeah, it's not going to require you know, superheroes and ghosts and I don't know, you know, gigantic cities of gold or something, right? It's going to be all about a particular individual who we follow in a really in a close way, and that following of that makes us think about loneliness or grief or heartbreak, or whatever the theme is that you're trying to interrogate. Communication. Okay, I'll stop. If you have any questions on that, let me know. I may do a second video on this, right, which is about kind of coming at it from yet another angle, but have a little bit of a think about that for yourself as well. Think about those things in your life. You know, some people say, you know, I need to write this thing because it's, you know, it's something that I have to say. I have a voice. I have to say this thing, right? That's kind of what you're looking for. You know, if you want to interrogate something that's bothering you, yeah, something that makes you kind of think there's an injustice here or there's something wrong here, that's usually the good place to start. And then you can start from creating an interesting character or exploring that theme. One will sort of solve the other, if you know what I mean, right? I'll be more specific another time, but think about that first. Okay, guys, it's a beautiful day. I'm out of here. Good luck thinking about what, you know, your ideas. Take the time to be quiet, you know, meditate on the theme, daydream, as Meisner would put it, and good luck. See you soon. Bye.